The city bus rumbled through the rain-slipped streets of Atlanta, its windows fogged up from the warmth of too many bodies pressed together in the morning rush. A young black teenager stood at the bus stop, his well-worn backpack clutched close to his chest. His mom had ironed his blue button-down shirt the night before, making sure he looked presentable for his chemistry exam, even though they couldn't afford new clothes this semester. The bus squealed to a halt, its doors hissing open. The boy stepped aboard, his worn sneakers leaving wet prints on the floor. The familiar smell of damp clothes and coffee from morning commuters filled the air. He dug into his pocket for his bus pass, the same one he'd been carefully protecting for months. It was his lifeline to school, and he couldn't afford to lose it. Every seat was taken, filled with people staring at their phones or gazing out windows streaked with raindrops. The boy didn't mind standing. He was used to it. He'd stayed up until midnight studying chemical equations, and his eyes felt heavy, but he forced himself to stay alert. His mom always told him that education was the key to a better future, and he believed her with all his heart. The bus lurched forward, and he grabbed the overhead rail, his chemistry notes threatening to spill from his unzipped backpack. He thought about his mom, who'd left for her night shift at the hospital just as he was starting his studying. She worked as a cleaning staff member, dreaming that one day her son would walk those same halls wearing a white coat. As the bus continued its journey, the boy noticed how people avoided eye contact, each lost in their own morning struggles. An old man clutched his coffee like a lifeline. A woman in scrubs dozed against the window, probably heading home after a long night shift, just like his mom. Two kids about his age were sharing earbuds, their heads bobbing to music he couldn't hear. Finally, a seat opened up near the middle of the bus. The boy made his way there, careful not to bump into anyone. Just as he was about to sit down, the bus stopped again. Through the foggy windows, he could see someone new waiting to board. His heart skipped a beat when he realized it was a pregnant woman, struggling with a heavy bag and trying to keep her balance in the rain. The boy's mind flashed to the stories his mom had told him about being pregnant with him, working 2 jobs and taking the bus every day. How sometimes no one would offer her a seat, and she'd have to stand for the whole 40-minute ride. How a kind stranger's small gesture could make all the difference in someone's day. Without hesitation, he remained standing, even though his legs ached from basketball practice the day before. He watched as the pregnant woman climbed aboard, her face tired but determined. She was wearing a teacher's badge around her neck, and her hands were full with what looked like student papers to grade. The boy felt something warm in his chest, the same feeling he got when he helped his elderly neighbor with her groceries or when he tutored younger kids at the community center. His mom always said that kindness wasn't about having much to give. It was about being willing to give what you had. The woman was now making her way down the aisle, looking uncertain as she realized there were no empty seats. The boy cleared his throat, pushing aside thoughts of how nice it would have been to rest his tired legs for the remainder of the 20-minute ride to school. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant being a little uncomfortable, and that was okay. This small moment, on an ordinary rainy morning, was about to change everything, though the boy had no way of knowing that yet. He was just doing what his heart told him was right, the way his mom had taught him. And sometimes, that's all it takes for extraordinary things to happen. The pregnant woman stood at the front of the bus, one hand gripping the rail tightly while the other rested protectively on her belly. The boy could see her trying to keep her balance as the bus swayed through traffic. Rain had soaked the bottom of her long skirt, and she looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying both a baby and a full day's responsibilities. She hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on staying upright as the bus jerked to a stop at another red light. Several passengers glanced up, then quickly looked away, pretending not to see her. The boy remembered how his mom would come home with swollen feet after long days at work when she was pregnant with his little sister. The memory made his decision even easier. Making his way through the crowded aisle, he held onto the overhead rails, careful not to bump into anyone. The floor was slippery from wet shoes, and briefcases and bags cluttered the narrow path. A businessman in an expensive suit shifted his legs ever so slightly, not enough to make real space, but just enough to show he'd noticed someone trying to pass. The boy's chemistry notes slipped from his backpack as he moved, and he had to quickly catch them before they scattered across the wet floor. These were the notes he'd stayed up late perfecting, knowing he needed to ace this exam to keep his grade point average high. His mom always said that opportunity comes to those who prepare for it, even when they're tired. As he got closer to the pregnant woman, he could see her teacher's badge more clearly now. It was from one of the elementary schools across town, the one where his cousin went. She was holding a stack of papers that looked like children's artwork, bright colors peeking out from clear plastic sleeves, probably protected from the rain. "Excuse me," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Would you like to take my seat? It's just back there, and it's right next to the window, so you won't get bumped by people passing." He gestured toward his recently vacated spot, still warm from where he briefly sat down. The woman's eyes met his, surprise flickering across her face, followed by genuine gratitude. It was the kind of look that made the boy stand a little straighter, feeling proud in a quiet way. This wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what he knew in his heart was right. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice carrying the gentle tone of someone who worked with young children. "You look tired yourself, and that backpack seems heavy." She was right. His backpack was loaded with textbooks, and his shoulders ached from carrying it. But he just smiled and shook his head. "I'm sure," he replied, already reaching for her bag to help her through the crowded aisle. "My stop isn't too far anyway." That wasn't exactly true. He had another 20 minutes to go, but he didn't want her to feel bad about accepting his seat. As they made their way back through the bus, something unexpected happened. A few other passengers started shifting in their seats, suddenly more aware of their surroundings. An elderly man who had been dozing opened his eyes and sat up straighter. A young woman quickly moved her purse from the empty seat next to her. It was as if the boy's small act of kindness had awakened something in the morning crowd. What the boy didn't notice was the man in the back of the bus, watching this scene unfold with keen interest. This man had spent years looking for young people who showed character when they thought nobody was watching. He saw how the boy didn't hesitate, didn't make a show of his kindness, didn't pull out his phone to record the good deed for social media. Instead, he simply did what needed to be done, with a genuine smile and gentle patience. The pregnant teacher settled into the seat, sighing with relief as she finally got off her feet. "Thank you," she said, looking up at the boy with eyes that were suddenly a bit misty. "You remind me of what I try to teach my students every day, that kindness matters more than anything else we can learn." The bus continued its journey through the rain-soaked streets, and the boy found himself standing near his old seat, now occupied by the pregnant teacher. He gripped the overhead rail, trying to keep his balance as the bus swayed. His chemistry notes were still threatening to slip from his backpack, but he managed to wedge them in a bit more securely. "Which grade do you teach?" he asked, genuinely curious about the colorful papers she was holding. His voice was soft, but clear over the gentle patter of rain against the windows and the hum of the bus engine. The teacher looked up from arranging her papers, a warm smile lighting up her tired face. "First grade," she replied, carefully sliding the artwork into a protective folder. These are their dreams and aspirations projects. They had to draw what they want to be when they grow up. The boy's eyes lit up at this. "That must be interesting," he said, steadying himself as the bus turned a corner. "When I was in first grade, I drew myself as a doctor. My teacher hung it on the wall for Parents' Night." He paused, then added shyly, "I still want to be one, actually." The teacher's expression softened even more. "A doctor. That's wonderful. Are you thinking about any particular specialty?" She shifted her bag to make more room for her growing belly, wincing slightly as the baby seemed to kick in response to the movement. "I want to be a pediatrician," he answered, his voice growing more confident. "My mom works nights cleaning at the children's hospital, Sometimes she tells me stories about the kids she meets there, how brave they are even when they're sick. I want to help kids like that." A businessman who had been pretending to read his newspaper lowered it slightly, listening to their conversation. The man in the back of the bus leaned forward, his interest growing with each word exchanged between the boy and the teacher. "The world needs more doctors who care," the teacher said, pulling out a small pack of crackers from her bag. "Would you like one? You probably didn't have time for breakfast if you were studying late." She'd noticed the chemistry notes peeking out of his backpack. The boy politely declined but appreciated the offer. "Thank you, but I had a granola bar. My mom always makes sure I eat something before school, even when she's tired from her shift." His voice carried a note of pride when he spoke about his mother. The teacher nodded understanding. "Single parent?" she asked gently. When the boy confirmed with a slight nod, she continued, "I was raised by a single mom too. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college. Now I try to help other kids believe in their dreams, just like she helped me believe in mine." The rain had started to ease up outside, and morning sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. The bus wasn't quite as crowded now, as several passengers had gotten off at recent stops. Still, the boy remained standing, occasionally shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You know," the teacher said thoughtfully, "I have some information about scholarship programs for future medical students. My husband works in hospital administration, and he's always talking about how they need more diverse voices in medicine. Would you be interested in learning more about that?" The boy's heart skipped a beat. Scholarships were exactly what he needed. His grades were good, but he knew his mom worried about college costs. "Yes, please," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite his excitement. "That would be really helpful." What neither of them knew was that the man in the back of the bus had pulled out his phone and was quietly making notes. He'd been searching for young people exactly like this boy, those who showed genuine kindness and determination, who had big dreams, but also the character to match them. The pregnant teacher reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a small notepad. As she wrote down some information for the boy, she suddenly stopped and laughed softly. "Here I am, about to give you all this information, and I don't even know your name." I guess kindness made us skip the introductions. The man in the back of the bus had seen thousands of people during his morning commutes over the years. He'd witnessed countless moments of rudeness, indifference, and people too busy with their phones to notice others around them. But today was different. Today, he'd seen something that reminded him why he'd started his foundation in the first place. As he watched the boy and the teacher talk, he couldn't help but think about his own journey. 20 years ago, he'd been a young medical student from a poor neighborhood, struggling to make ends meet. Now he owned one of the largest healthcare groups in the city, but he never forgot where he came from or the random acts of kindness that helped him get there. The bus hit a pothole, causing everyone to sway. The boy quickly steadied the pregnant teacher's arm, making sure she didn't lose her balance, even while he struggled to keep his own. It was these small, instinctive gestures that caught the man's attention. The boy wasn't doing it for show, it was simply who he was. The man pulled out his business card, turning it over in his hands thoughtfully. He'd given out maybe 5 of these special cards in the past year, each one leading to a life-changing scholarship. His foundation specifically looked for young people who showed exceptional character, particularly those who demonstrated kindness when they thought nobody was watching. Through the conversations he'd been overhearing, he'd learned everything he needed to know. A boy who stayed up late studying chemistry, while his single mother worked night shifts cleaning hospitals. A young man who dreamed of becoming a pediatrician not for the money or prestige, but because he wanted to help sick children. Someone who gave up his seat without hesitation and didn't even consider it worthy of mention. The man watched as the teacher wrote something down for the boy, probably information about medical school scholarships. He smiled, knowing that what he was about to offer would be far more immediate and substantial. His foundation didn't just provide tuition. It offered mentorship, internships, and a clear path to medical school. As he stood up to make his way toward them, the bus driver announced the next stop. The boy looked up, realizing it was almost time for him to get off. The man knew he had to act quickly. He learned long ago that opportunities don't always come with perfect timing. Sometimes you had to create the right moment yourself. Moving through the now less crowded bus, he could hear more of their conversation. The teacher was telling the boy about her first-grade students, how they too had big dreams, and how she wished more people would encourage them the way the boy's mother encouraged him. The boy listened intently, showing genuine interest in her stories about her classroom. The businessman who had been pretending to read his newspaper was now openly watching the scene unfold. Even the tired nurse who had been dozing earlier was awake and paying attention. There was something about the genuine interaction between the boy and the teacher that had captured everyone's attention. The man straightened his tie, a habit from years of business meetings. But this wasn't a business meeting. This was about changing someone's life. He thought about all the qualified candidates his foundation had interviewed over the years, and how sometimes the most promising students weren't the ones with perfect SAT scores, but the ones who showed perfect kindness. Just as the boy was about to say goodbye to the teacher, the man cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years of experience in changing lives. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about medical school." He reached for his business card, knowing that what he was about to do would ripple far beyond this rainy morning bus ride. The boy turned toward him, curiosity mixing with slight confusion on his face. The pregnant teacher looked up too, her hand protectively touching her belly as she watched this unexpected development unfold. What none of them knew was that this simple bus ride was about to become a story they would tell for years to come. The bus hummed steadily as the businessman held out his card, its gold lettering catching the morning light that now streamed through the windows. The rain had finally stopped, as if nature itself was pausing to witness this moment. The boy looked at the card hesitantly, not sure if he should take it. "I'm the CEO of a healthcare group," the businessman explained, his voice warm and genuine. "But more importantly, I run a foundation that helps promising young people achieve their dreams of working in medicine." He glanced at the pregnant teacher, who was watching the scene with growing interest, her hand still resting on her belly. The boy carefully took the card, reading it with wide eyes. The company name was one he recognized. It was on the side of the children's hospital where his mother worked. His hands trembled slightly as he held the card, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Thank you, sir. But why are you giving this to me?" The businessman smiled, settling into an empty seat nearby. "I've been watching you this morning," he said honestly. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, making both the boy and the teacher laugh, breaking the tension. "I saw how you gave up your seat without hesitation. How you helped this lady through the bus. How you talked about your dreams of becoming a pediatrician." The pregnant teacher nodded enthusiastically. "He wants to help sick children," she chimed in, feeling somehow part of this extraordinary moment. "And he takes care of his mother too. She works night shifts at the hospital." She had become an unexpected advocate for the boy she just met. "That's exactly the kind of person we're looking for," the businessman continued. "Our foundation doesn't just look at grades, though I can tell from your chemistry notes that you're a serious student. We look for character, for kindness, for the kind of person who will make not just a good doctor, but a great one." Other passengers were listening now, no longer pretending to be absorbed in their phones or newspapers. The tired nurse who had been dozing earlier was fully awake, smiling as she remembered her own journey through medical school. The businessman who had been reading his newspaper had put it down completely. "We'd like to talk to your mother," the businessman said, pulling out a second card. "This one has my personal number. Our foundation offers full scholarships to medical school, but we also have a pre-med program for high school students. Mentorship, summer internships, everything you need to prepare for a future in medicine." The boy's hands were shaking more visibly now as he took the second card. He thought about his mother, how tired she looked when she came home from her night shifts, how she still always made sure he had breakfast and clean clothes. How she never complained, even though he knew she worried about paying for college. I don't know what to say, the boy stammered, looking between the businessman and the teacher, as if seeking confirmation that this was really happening. The teacher reached out and squeezed his hand gently, her eyes bright with tears of joy. You don't have to say anything right now, the businessman replied kindly. Just call that number this weekend. Bring your mother. We'll talk about your future. He paused, then added with a smile, and maybe you can tell me more about why you want to be a pediatrician. The bus was slowing down, approaching the boy's stop. The morning sun had fully broken through the clouds now, casting a golden glow over the scene. The boy carefully tucked both cards into his chemistry notebook, the same notebook he'd been studying from late last night, never imagining that today would bring such an extraordinary turn of events. The pregnant teacher beamed at him. This is what I mean when I tell my first graders that kindness matters, she said softly. Sometimes a single act of kindness can open doors you never even knew existed. The bus hummed steadily as the businessman held out his card, its gold lettering catching the morning light that now streamed through the windows. The rain had finally stopped, as if nature itself was pausing to witness this moment. The boy looked at the card hesitantly, not sure if he should take it. I'm the CEO of a healthcare group, the businessman explained, his voice warm and genuine. But more importantly, I run a foundation that helps promising young people achieve their dreams of working in medicine. He glanced at the pregnant teacher, who was watching the scene with growing interest, her hand still resting on her belly. The boy carefully took the card, reading it with wide eyes. The company name was one he recognized. It was on the side of the children's hospital where his mother worked. His hands trembled slightly as he held the card, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Thank you, sir. But why are you giving this to me? The businessman smiled, settling into an empty seat nearby. I've been watching you this morning, he said honestly. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, making both the boy and the teacher laugh, breaking the tension. I saw how you gave up your seat without hesitation. How you helped this lady through the bus. How you talked about your dreams of becoming a pediatrician. The pregnant teacher nodded enthusiastically. He wants to help sick children, she chimed in, feeling somehow part of this extraordinary moment. And he takes care of his mother too. She works night shifts at the hospital. She had become an unexpected advocate for the boy she just met. That's exactly the kind of person we're looking for, the businessman continued. Our foundation doesn't just look at grades, though I can tell from your chemistry notes that you're a serious student. We look for character, for kindness, for the kind of person who will make not just a good doctor, but a great one. Other passengers were listening now, no longer pretending to be absorbed in their phones or newspapers. The tired nurse who had been dozing earlier was fully awake, smiling as she remembered her own journey through medical school. The businessman who had been reading his newspaper had put it down completely. We'd like to talk to your mother, the businessman said, pulling out a second card. This one has my personal number. Our foundation offers full scholarships to medical school, but we also have a pre-med program for high school students. Mentorship, summer internships, everything you need to prepare for a future in medicine. The boy's hands were shaking more visibly now as he took the second card. He thought about his mother, how tired she looked when she came home from her night shifts. How she still always made sure he had breakfast and clean clothes. How she never complained, even though he knew she worried about paying for college. I don't know what to say, the boy stammered, looking between the businessman and the teacher, as if seeking confirmation that this was really happening. The teacher reached out and squeezed his hand gently, her eyes bright with tears of joy. You don't have to say anything right now, the businessman replied kindly. Just call that number this weekend. Bring your mother. We'll talk about your future. He paused, then added with a smile, and maybe you can tell me more about why you want to be a pediatrician. The bus was slowing down, approaching the boy's stop. The morning sun had fully broken through the clouds now, casting a golden glow over the scene. The boy carefully tucked both cards into his chemistry notebook, the same notebook he'd been studying from late last night, never imagining that today would bring such an extraordinary turn of events. The pregnant teacher beamed at him. "This is what I mean when I tell my first graders that kindness matters," she said softly. "Sometimes a single act of kindness can open doors you never even knew existed." That evening, the boys sat at their small kitchen table, waiting for his mother to come home from her shift. He placed the 2 business cards and the teacher's note carefully on the table, arranging and rearranging them nervously. The chemistry exam had gone well. All that late-night studying had paid off. But his mind kept drifting back to that morning's extraordinary events. The sound of keys in the door made his heart jump. His mother walked in, still wearing her hospital cleaning staff uniform, her comfortable shoes scuffed from hours of walking hospital corridors. Despite her obvious exhaustion, her face lit up when she saw him, just like it did every day. "Baby, why are you still up?" she asked, setting down her bag. "You must be tired after that big exam today." She noticed the unusual look on his face, a mix of excitement and nervousness she hadn't seen before. The boy pulled out a chair for her. "Mama, something happened today," he said softly. "Something really big." He pushed the business cards toward her gently, watching as she sat down and pulled her reading glasses from her uniform pocket. His mother picked up the first card, her eyes widening as she read the healthcare group's name. This is where I work," she said slowly, looking up at her son with questions in her eyes. Then she picked up the second card, the one with the personal phone number. "It happened on the bus this morning," the boy began, his voice getting stronger as he told the story. He told her about the pregnant teacher, about giving up his seat, about the businessman who had been watching. His mother listened intently, her hand reaching across the table to hold his. "The foundation offers full scholarships," he explained, his voice catching with emotion. "Not just for medical school, but they have a program for high school students too. Internships, mentoring, everything I'd need to become a doctor." He squeezed his mother's hand. "He wants to meet with us this weekend." His mother was quiet for a long moment, looking at the cards, then at her son. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "All these years," she whispered, "all these years cleaning those hospital floors, watching doctors rush by, praying you'd have a chance to be one of them someday." The boy got up and moved to hug his mother. "Remember when I was little," he said, his own eyes getting watery, "and I used to draw pictures of me in a white coat. You always kept them, even when we had to move and couldn't take much with us." His mother nodded, wiping her eyes. "I still have every single one," she said proudly. Then she straightened up, her natural strength showing through her tears. "Tell me more about this teacher. She saw something special in you too." The boy smiled, pulling out the teacher's note. "She wants me to come talk to her first graders about becoming a doctor," he said. "She says they need role models." His mother beamed at this. She'd always taught him that success meant helping others up the ladder too. They sat there in their small kitchen, the cards on the table between them, talking about possibilities that had seemed out of reach just that morning. His mother made them both tea, and they talked about everything. His dreams, her sacrifices, their shared hope for the future. "You know what makes me proudest?" his mother said finally, holding her warm teacup. "Not that someone noticed you, but what they noticed. Your kindness. Your character." She reached out to touch his cheek. "All these years, I tried to teach you that kindness matters more than anything else. Today proved that." Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like stars. The boy looked at his mother, still in her work uniform, her eyes bright with pride and hope, and he knew that this opportunity wasn't just about him. It was about both of them. About every early morning she'd walked to the bus stop. About every late night she'd worked so he could have a better future. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, a stark contrast to the rainy Monday when everything had changed. The boy and his mother stood outside the gleaming office building, both dressed in their Sunday best. His mother had pressed his shirt twice, making sure every crease was perfect. She'd polished his dress shoes until they shone, even though they were a bit scuffed from years of wear. "Ready?" she asked, squeezing his hand like she used to do when he was little. They'd woken up extra early to take the bus here, the same bus line where this journey had begun. This time, though, they sat together, quietly holding hands and practicing what they would say. The security guard at the front desk smiled warmly as they approached. "You must be our special visitors," he said, handing them visitor badges. "The boss has been talking about you all week." The boy and his mother exchanged surprised looks they hadn't expected to be expected. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, both of them watching the numbers climb higher and higher. The boy's mother reached over and straightened his tie one last time, a nervous gesture that made him smile. When the doors opened, they stepped into a world of soft carpets and large windows with views across the entire city. The businessman was waiting for them in the lobby, dressed more casually than he had been on the bus. "Welcome," he said warmly, leading them not to a formal conference room, but to a comfortable sitting area with sofas and a coffee table. "I hope you don't mind, but I invited someone else to join us." To their surprise, the pregnant teacher from the bus walked in, her smile as warm as they remembered. "I couldn't miss this," she said, hugging both of them like old friends. "My students made something for you." She pulled out a large envelope filled with drawings from her first graders, pictures of doctors helping people, each one signed with wobbly handwriting. The businessman watched as they looked through the drawings, then pulled out a folder of his own. "These," he said, "are the real reason we're here today." He opened it to reveal documents about the Foundation's program, not just a scholarship, but a complete pathway to medical school. "We want to invest in your future," he explained, speaking to both the boy and his mother. "Full scholarship for college and medical school. But more than that, mentorship, internships at our hospitals, guidance every step of the way." He paused, looking directly at the boy. "All we ask in return is that you keep being exactly who you are, someone who sees a need and fills it, who shows kindness without expecting anything back." The boy's mother wiped tears from her eyes as she looked through the documents. "All these years," she whispered, "all those night shifts." The businessman handed her a tissue, but his eyes were a bit watery too. "There's one more thing," the teacher added, rubbing her pregnant belly. "My husband runs the volunteer program at the Children's Hospital. We'd love to have you start shadowing doctors there on weekends, getting real experience, seeing what your future could look like." The boy sat there, overwhelmed by the kindness surrounding him. The businessman who saw potential in a simple act of kindness. The teacher who believed in him enough to share his story with her students. His mother who had worked so hard to give him a chance at his dreams. "I don't know how to thank you," he started, but the businessman held up his hand. "Thank us by becoming the kind of doctor who remembers what it's like to be on the other side," he said. "Thank us by keeping your heart open, by seeing people who need help, by remembering that sometimes the smallest gestures can change lives." The morning sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the room and the faces of everyone in it. On the coffee table, a first grader's drawing showed a doctor in a white coat, helping someone up. Below it, in child's handwriting, were the words, "Kindness is the best medicine." 5 years later, a young medical student stood in front of a classroom of excited first graders. He wore a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck, and his smile was as warm as ever. The children sat cross-legged on the colorful carpet, looking up at him with wide, wondering eyes. "Do you know why I wanted to be a doctor?" he asked the class. A dozen small hands shot into the air, but he continued, "It started with a bus ride on a rainy morning, and a simple choice to be kind." The children leaned forward, sensing a story coming. At the back of the classroom sat their teacher, now holding a sleeping toddler, the baby she'd been carrying that day on the bus. Next to her sat his mother, no longer in a cleaning uniform, but wearing scrubs with the hospital logo. She'd been promoted to patient care coordinator, a position created specially for her by the foundation. Sometimes, the medical student continued, one small act of kindness can change everything. Like when you share your lunch with someone who forgot theirs, or help a friend who's fallen on the playground. The children nodded seriously, understanding these examples from their own lives. He pulled out an old, wrinkled drawing from his white coat pocket, one of the pictures these students' predecessors had made for him 5 years ago. Your old classmates drew this for me, he explained, showing them the faded picture of a doctor helping someone. It hung on my wall all through college, reminding me why I wanted to do this. A small girl in the front raised her hand. But weren't you scared? My mom says being a doctor is really hard. The medical student smiled, remembering his own fears and doubts. It is hard, he agreed. But I had help. Remember that businessman from the bus? His foundation didn't just give me money for school. They gave me mentors, other doctors who taught me, guided me, showed me the way. And now, I get to do the same for others. He told them about the program he'd started at his medical school, helping other students from similar backgrounds find their path to becoming doctors. How every Saturday, he volunteered at the same children's hospital where his mother used to clean floors, reading stories to sick kids and showing them that someone who looked like them could wear a white coat too. The businessman himself had retired now, but his foundation had grown. That one act of kindness on a rainy morning had inspired a whole movement. Other companies started similar programs, looking for young people who showed character through small acts of kindness. And you know what's really special? He asked the class. That pregnant teacher who shared her snacks with me on the bus. Her baby is now old enough to be in first grade too. And guess what that little one wants to be when they grow up? A doctor. The children chorused, making everyone laugh. His mother watched from the back, tears of pride in her eyes. She thought about those long nights cleaning hospital floors, dreaming of a better future for her son. Now he was here, almost finished with medical school, teaching these children that their dreams were possible too. As the class ended and the children lined up to take turns listening to their hearts with his stethoscope, the medical student caught his mother's eye. They shared a smile, remembering that rainy morning when giving up a bus seat had opened up a world of possibilities. Remember, kids, he said as they gathered their things, kindness isn't just about being nice. It's about seeing someone who needs help and doing something about it. You never know. The simple kindness you show today might just change someone's life tomorrow. Outside the classroom window, another rainy day had begun. Somewhere in the city, another bus was making its rounds, carrying people with their own dreams and stories. And maybe, just maybe, another act of kindness was about to change someone else's life.